Okay, and 3, 2, 1.
Bernie LeBron, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm glad we could do this today.
Okay, I'm glad I came.
It's a rainy, cold day outside today,
Right.
but we're gonna get very comfortable and very warm in here today. Bernie, what year did you start teaching in Brentwood?
In Brentwood, 1972.
So where had you been before that?
Oh, I worked in industry.
Is that what you did before?
Yes. I worked for the Sperry Corporation. I worked for Gyrodyne. And I was going to college nights, too.
Ah.
All right, so that I graduated late. I graduated from Queens College in 1970.
Oh, I see.
All right, so, and prior to that, I had taken some courses at CCNY and PACE, and I always wanted to finish. So, and then I went ahead. My kids thought I was crazy because I had to commute from here, from Comac to Flushing, to Queens.
That's a long trek, yeah.
All right, but it set a goal for them because they know we have a lot of perseverance in the family. I used to leave Gyrodyne at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and haul into the Queens College and get home at 10:30 at night.
Oh boy, not see very much of the kids then for those weeks that we were taking
just
the
on
courses.
weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
But it worked out fine.
What made you, I'm curious, having come from industry, what made you decide to pursue a teaching career at that point in your life when you already had a family?
Yes. It's something I always wanted to do. I wanted to teach.
Okay.
And I wanted to teach social studies.
Ah.
But you know how difficult it is to get into social studies.
You bet.
Although I did manage to teach some courses in social, in English and Spanish. So
were you certified then in social studies and?
Yes, in Spanish, in social studies, and in bilingual education. In ESL, I had 3 certifications.
Oh boy, they I'm sure they used you
yes.
all over the board.
They moved me around. Spanish department, social studies, bilingual, ESL.
You must have had wonderful exposure with kids, though. You got to see kids in all different.
Right.
All different. But was all different levels, or were you just at the high school primarily?
At the high school, yes. So, and it all came about because I got involved in a group who was starting to, they wanted to begin an Aspira program in Brentwood to get outside help for the kids to go to college. Aspira is a group in New York, and they wanted to bring a chapter of Aspira out here. And at that time, there was Nikki Ninbresh was part of the group,
yes,
and Rosalie Cementi, Noel Bonilla, a good cross-section of people. And I got to know them. And 2 years later, I had graduated from college, and an opening occurred, and it helped me get in.
As a non-Spanish speaking person, Aspira means aspire or
to aspire,
aspiration?
yes, to aspire.
Uh-huh.
So they've had a good track record in New
Were you
York.
familiar with that organization prior to coming to Brentwood, or was it something that you learned about once you arrived here?
Well, I had heard about it.
Okay.
It was started primarily by Puerto Ricans, but then they've expanded out to help all the Hispanics.
Well, at one time, Brentwood had a very large percentage of Puerto Rican people relative to other minority groups.
That's correct.
There was a large.
And now it's gotten smaller. And so many of those leaders have gone, like Alice Perez and her son Ray. You know, we've lost a lot of people.
Yes.
And Mr. Colong, who was on the board,
correct.
He's gone. You know, one by one, they've left.
I heard Elizabeth Guanil, who was, of course, one time a very
very active.
proactive person in the community, speak on Channel 12's. Alan Oren does a little segment on Brentwood every once in a while, and he has a segment where Elizabeth Guanil speaks to the fact that one of the Puerto Rican dreams of that era was to achieve political prominence and power, and she said in the interview that they hadn't yet achieved that dream.
No.
Is that still the case today, do you think? Or
they still haven't achieved it, but I think that case in Hempstead, where they're forcing Hempstead to break up into districts, might be the answer in Brentwood.
Oh, very interesting.
Because in Brentwood, any candidate who ran had to run townwide, and always got defeated.
Aha.
See? Including Mr. The president of the board.
Okay.
Mr. Felicio.
Okay.
All right. Now he ran. We thought he would win, and yet he got clobbered in the other sections of town. Had we had a district, that breakup of districts, I think Mr. Felicio probably would have got in.
You're probably right. Yes.
Yeah. So, and for the other Hispanics, it's been very difficult. But perhaps after that case is settled, that it might pick it up here.
There is a feeling that Brentwood right now is on the verge of a whole new beginning. That some very exciting things are happening. What with passage of the bond issue and many other changes. Young staff members coming into the district in droves. And a very supportive board at the present time. That we're going to see some wonderful change. Let's come back to Bernie LeBron. Tell me about family, Bernie. Who's home?
Well, right now it's just my wife and I. My son is a lieutenant commander in the Navy.
Which son is this now?
I only have one son and two daughters.
I see. Okay.
My son, Robert.
Okay.
And he's a chaplain.
Oh.
He's an Episcopalian priest, and he's a chaplain in the Navy. And right now he's stationed at Anderson Air Force Base, where the Navy has 1,500 people, besides the Air Force personnel who are the majority. That's where Clinton's plane is clad. Air Force One is stationed there. So, we followed him around. He's been to Hawaii for 3 years, and we went out to see him. He was chaplain at the Naval Hospital in Illinois, and he did quite well. He ran a good drug program there. So it's been exciting watching him move around.
It has. Now, he watched you finish all your degrees and work your way through. Now you can watch him.
Right. The year I graduated from Queens College, he graduated from Comac High School.
Oh, wonderful. And tell me about your daughters.
My daughters, Jeanette, she lives out in Farmingville, and Lisa.
Okay.
Lisa is a programmer for Pathmark. She programs all the scanners.
Oh, wow.
And she lives in West Islip. She's married to a Suffolk policeman who's also a licensed electrician.
Oh, boy.
And Jeanette is married to an electrician also in Farmingville. So each of them have 2 children. Altogether we have 6 grandchildren. My son Robert has 2, Benjamin and Rachel. They're in the Maryland schools now in Waldorf, Maryland. And the others are in elementary school here in Long Island.
So you get more of a chance to speak, to visit with the grandchildren up here, obviously, than you do at Maryland. How often do you get down to Maryland, Bernie?
We'll be going down at Easter.
At Easter, good.
We're going to spend Easter Sunday with them.
Oh, that's nice.
And before that, he was at Camp Lejeune, so we got down there on the Marine base.
Tell me about the qualities that you see in your grandchildren that you've seen and that you know are family qualities. What are have they begun to manifest themselves yet among
I think Benjamin, the oldest boy, I think he's following my son. He's very inquisitive. He's into computers in a big way. They're into the internet. But it all starts with games. He started with playing games on the computer, and then gradually he got serious about it, left the games, and now he's into other things.
Right.
So it's good. And
now you retired in 1992.
Right.
Same year that I retired. But you have done something that I haven't done. You have continued.
Yes.
You left day school, and tell us what you've done.
Well, I was working nights 3 years prior to retirement, and Mr. Muckle said, "Stay with us. If you're not doing anything else." So I did, and I teach ESL 2 nights, and I teach the high school equivalency in Spanish, which has really grown with the influx of so many other people.
Oh, I'll bet.
Other Hispanics. At one time, I taught in the Spanish GED with Eli Acosta.
Yes.
Who I think is retiring this year. And we used to wait around for students to show up.
Isn't that something? Yes.
Now we have a waiting list of 20 people, and we have 60 people registered. And we have another teacher who teaches here in Brentwood, Mrs. Gomez. She teaches 3 of the subjects, and I teach 3.
So even with that, do you have plenty of time that you didn't have before when you were in day school?
Yeah. Well, I go to the Y
Mm-hmm.
3 times a week. I was there this morning.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I didn't do this morning was swim.
Okay.
But it's great. Quite a few people. Marty Rigger from the basket, he's there, and he's very active at the Y too. It's the Hebrew Y in Comac, and quite a few. The fellow from social studies, tall guy, Herb
Laub?
Laub,
Is that right?
and he's teaching tennis there too.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So you've continued teaching even though you've left the day school. You're still very active. What about summer school? Did you ever do that, Bernie?
I only taught summer school once.
One time?
And I didn't like it. It was just too hot.
Yeah.
And I'd rather go back to school fresh after the summer.
Oh, I agree with you.
I didn't like it.
I agree with you.
I thought 2 weeks off at the end of the summer wasn't enough to recharge your battery.
You having fun?
Oh, yes.
Good.
I enjoy it because we have a good success rate. And, I had to put it together myself. But
you also work with somebody or for somebody who is a joy to work with in school too.
Right. Charlotte the Champ, she's fantastic. Very cooperative in getting me materials and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure. And Tony too.
That's right.
In the
Tony DeMarco
in the computer room.
Yeah, great.
Everybody loves
When
him.
you left day school, you were assigned to which building now? Were you in the R.O.S at that
Mostly
time?
in the R.O.S,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Okay.
And
so the total number of years then that you ultimately had in education were how many?
well, since if I count the time since I retired, now it'd be 25 years that I've been in education.
25 years, yes. And you mentioned that you first, I don't know if I asked you this before, when you first came to Brentwood and how you happened to come to Brentwood. What brought you to this community? I know that you had mentioned that you'd worked in industry before and you had worked for Sperry's and others. And you lived in Brentwood at that time?
No, we lived in Comac.
You live in Comac, that's
right. But it's just over on the other side of the expressway.
What I'm saying living, what I'm thinking of is, how did you find about the job openings here in...
Well, because the people in the Aspira committee...
That's how you found out?
Yes, Rosalie and Mrs. Nikki Nimbrash.
Who interviewed you, Bernie?
Dave Martz.
Ah, do you remember anything about that interview?
And Nikki Nin.
And Nikki Nin, okay.
And Nikki Nimbrash. And...
was it at the high school that it took place?
Yes. Well, no, the interview took place over at the old administration
Which was
building.
in the annex to the library.
To the library, time, right. And I think, I think I had a lot of spark and I wanted to do things. I wanted to get involved. And Mr. Martz felt that if we had a good Hispanic club here, that we could sort of keep everybody occupied and out of trouble. And we did. That time, Mrs. Alice Perez got transferred over here. That was Ray's mother.
Ray's mother, yes.
And she was great in forming plays and dramas and what have you. And together, we put together a club. We had 120 members at one time.
Wow.
And we participated in, she started a traveling theater, and we had about 4 or 5 trips to the city every year. And
there was a sense of cohesiveness, though, a sense of community among Puerto Rican groups in the community, even outside the school. I mean, there was a very active.
Yes.
But that's cultural, isn't it, Bernie? A lot of that comes from
we had
culture.
people from Central Islip that were coming over here to help out too. And I have to say, Stan Yankowski was very cooperative and helpful when we started. We had dances here. Like now, they try to keep the numbers down to about no more than 100. We had dances. We had close to 500 students.
Amazing, yes. Yeah.
And Stan always came.
Yeah.
And he had trust in us, and we were lucky. All the dances down through those years, we never had a fight. We never had any problems.
Yeah.
And except that they didn't want to leave.
Yes. Yes.
So you needed Stan at about 11:30, 11:45 to throw the lights on.
Have you seen changes in not just the community, but have you seen changes in the school over the last 15, 20 years that you can comment on? Any of the things that you've seen that are different from when you first arrived?
Well, when I first came here, we had the portables
Okay.
the so-called temporary portables,
Yes.
which lasted quite a while. And now, look what we have now. We have the library and the computer room and all these other. So that's been a big change, and it's been quite helpful. And
what positions other than the classroom teaching that you did and the work with Aspira, were there any other assignments or volunteer or appointments that you've had to handle over the years since being in Brentwood? Were there any projects that you took to heart? And
well, the club basically, and
Okay.
and we did everything with the club. We took the kids to colleges so they could see what the campus was like. I worked for Westbury as an admissions counselor while I was
that's right.
working here. I was there for 3 years, and I learned a lot about financial aid and admissions, and I was able to
Wonderful.
pass that along to students.
Yeah.
So we always talked up going on to college, that this was just a transition to go to college. Always talking.
Bernie, I remember there was some, this goes back now maybe 10 years, but there were some articles in the New York Times that referred to the fact that there was a 20% dropout rate among Latino or Hispanic students from school. Did you find that to be true with the students that you worked with? Was it that high here in Brentwood?
Well, after a while, I worked primarily with the bilingual students, and they didn't drop out at the same rate as the, let's say, the American Hispanic who was here. They were dropping out in larger numbers. And I think that the rate in Brentwood is not as high as other areas, like, say, in New York City.
That would be my intuition.
Yeah. And, most of
There's a lot more personal contact with kids in Brentwood, it seems to me. There's a closer relationship between teachers and students, and that very often keeps people in.
Yeah, and the Puerto Rican or Hispanic who was out here was a homeowner, and that makes a big difference.
Too.
Where they had some kind of involvement in the district through votes, and they were concerned with their children going on for, higher education.
Did you ever get involved in any of the political activity of the union or of the organization?
Well, Les Black appointed me to the board because he felt that he wanted a Hispanic presence. So he appointed me to the board. I was on the board for a couple of years.
On the executive board of the BTA? Yeah. Tell me about some of the memories that you have of those times, or some of the things that might have happened.
Well, let's see. Well, I do know that as I left, it seems like that executive board moved in body into the administration. I remember that last year, Les Black left the administration, and Fasulo, and some other people became either principals, or they all.
So there was a kind of a training ground for administrative, for management positions.
Right, it worked out quite well.
Well, what do you miss most about doing the daytime experience, Bernie?
Well,
I'm asking you that. You know what the second question is going to be, but what do you miss the most?
Well, I don't miss getting up in the morning.
That was going to be my second question.
At 5:45 every day. I think it was the interaction between the students that it left me energized enough to come back at night and work with the older Hispanics in the community. So it's and that has changed a lot too. Where today it's all Central America, Puerto Ricans are almost non-existent in the evening program. Out of 60 people that we have this year, there's only 2 Puerto Ricans. All the others are from El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, and other areas, Mexico.
Wow.
So,
where were you born?
I was born in New York. My parents came from Puerto Rico.
You say in Manhattan?
In Manhattan.
What part of Manhattan were you born?
Oh, let's see. On Lenox Avenue and 117th Street. Yeah.
Okay. And when would that have been, Bernie?
1928. Yeah. My parents came here in 1924.
From
Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Yeah. My father came first, and then he sent for his new wife.
Yes.
And we settled because that was Spanish Harlem at the time.
Right.
Spanish Harlem went from from Lenox Avenue down to 3rd Avenue, from 106th Street up to 116th Street. That was Spanish Harlem. And everything. It was a Spanish world.
Yes.
That's why when I started school, I couldn't speak English.
And where did you start school? Where did you go to school?
Well, 111th Street and in Park Avenue, there was elementary school. I don't know the number.
Mm-hmm.
But I lived in a Spanish world because we went to a Spanish church. My father read me La Prensa in Spanish at night. Radio was Spanish. The stores we shopped in, everything.
So in many ways, people who would take issue with this are forgetting a sense of history, that things have always been like this in one community or another.
Right.
And there's nothing new about that. So when you started elementary school, you were then immersed in English classes, were you at that point?
No, there was no such thing. There was no ESL and there was no immersion.
There wasn't?
No.
So how did you learn to speak English then? You spoke Spanish at home?
In the streets.
And in the street?
Yeah.
Okay.
With American blacks.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started picking up words. And then my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Smith, who kept me back in kindergarten.
Kept you back in kindergarten.
Well, my mother had registered me when I was 4.5. She said, and my name was Bernardo at the time. I still had the O. She says, Bernardo, I have to keep you back. You're too young and you don't know enough English to go to the first grade.
Okay.
So, and then I progressed from there.
Mm-hmm.
By the time, well, let's see, 1938, my father put us in a parochial school. We had moved uptown Manhattan, up to Washington Heights. And he put me in a Catholic school there. And there was a German nun there who took a special interest in me. And she put me in the choir. I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot with her. Mm-hmm. So by the 5th grade, I was up there amongst the top 5% of the class.
Bernie, do you remember her name?
Sister Rose.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you don't forget a person like
you
that.
bet.
When my mother took me to register, she pulled out the little thing that she had and she blew a couple of notes and she had me, sing those notes. And she says, oh, you're good material for the choir. And it worked out fine because we went to the 1939 World's Fair and we sang at the French Pavilion.
Wow.
Yeah. And at something else, another building we went. So that was
big deal.
What an exposure.
Now you're mentioning the late 30s. You were a child during the Depression.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any memories of that time? What it was like growing up during the Depression? Kids today read about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, my father would never ask for any public assistance. He always wanted to do it on his own. And God, I remember he was probably making about $16 a week with 3 kids. And, was moving around from apartment to apartment because every year the landlord would offer you a free, there was a lot of vacancies at the time. That I remember. You get a month for free and he would paint if you would take the 5th floor.
Okay.
So
to climb the stairs.
Right. And in the spring, if you look down the block, you see all these moving vans. Every spring, there was hundreds of people moving around from place to place.
Is that right?
To get a free month's rent.
To get 3 months rent. Wow.
And
do you remember? Do you have any specific memories of the kinds of things that kids might read about, the hardships, the hard times, or did your folks pretty much protect you guys from that you didn't see it?
Well, we were involved in the church, and I think that helped a lot. That we had a sense of knowing that we had a place, and that my father was a leader amongst the church. He started the Holy Name Society and the Miraculous Medal Church, which a Spanish priest who had come over with some of the people purchased a synagogue on 114th Street and 7th Avenue.
Oh.
And they converted it into a Catholic church.
I'll be darned. Okay.
And today it's a Black Baptist church. The Hispanics had it for about 30 or 40 years. But then that area has changed totally into Black Harlem.
Yes.
So they eventually sold the church. And there's 2 other Spanish churches in Spanish Harlem, St. Cecilia's and another one where Hispanics go now. Your
father sounds like a very interesting man. Tell me about him. What you mentioned that he came first to this country and then brought your mother.
Right. He had gone to the Dominican Republic from Puerto Rico to try and start something for himself in Dominican capital. And that didn't work out too well. So he went back to Puerto Rico and then came to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And he was quite a guy. He only had 4 grades of elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
but he could speak in front of 100, 200 people. He was an organizer. And
That's a gift.
oh, yeah. And so, like I said, that was our place. So we had a place to go. We had a feeling of belonging to something. So that sort of eased the depression, although I do remember cold apartments.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we went back to Puerto Rico because I got sick. I had such a bad congestion from the cold apartments that we lived in. So the doctor says, you better. So back in 1936, we left New York in a boat because there were no planes going at that time.
Right.
And we got caught in a hurricane going down. And
to get some warm weather, some sunshine.
Yeah. And I came back in time in May, and we were sitting, it was too late to start school, and we were sitting in a playground in Alexander Hamilton Place when the Hindenburg came across, and we looked up, and I said, what's that? We called him, my mother said, that's a Zeppelin. And I remember seeing the swastika in the back.
Wow.
Then we went home, and around 5:30, we put the radio on, and we heard about the crash.
Wow. Now there's a piece of living history.
Yeah, right.
What was your mother like, Bernie?
Oh, she was good.
Quality. Tell me, what were some of her qualities?
She loved to read. She could recite poetry. She only had about 3 grades of elementary school, and yet she could recite poetry for hours. And she wanted us to continue learning our Spanish while we were learning English. She wanted us to maintain both languages. And so she was helpful. And I used to say, Mom, what do I need Spanish for? I should learn English. She says, keep it up. So I always think back when I started with the bilingual classes, I said, my mother was right.
She sure was.
I'm glad I kept the Spanish.
Sure was. That's very unusual. Usually the first, well, no, not unusual in your mother's case. I would say it's unusual that you have continued, because so often it's the first generation born here that wants to disassociate themselves. Break away. It's wonderful. You're very fortunate. I wish I could say that I had enough sense to do what you've done. Where are you in the birth order among your siblings?
Well, there's my oldest brother, who's in Tucson, Arizona, and then me, and then my sister. There was another brother born after me, but he passed away. Yeah, a year after he was born. So
you're one of the middle.
Yeah.
One of the middle kids. Right. Think that affected you growing up in any way? We see sometimes the students in our classes, the oldest have a particular pattern and the youngest have a different. I wonder how the middle sometimes make out.
When things were getting bad, the depression affected us in that way, that my brother was forced to quit high school, and he was going to Stuyvesant, which was a very good high school.
Yes.
And he left to go to work with the printing press downtown. And then the war broke out, and he volunteered for the Navy. And he went, and he came back to the printing press after the war, and eventually went back to school at night and got his GED, and that helped him.
See, it sounds like almost everyone in the family has really pursued higher education.
My brother, he's quite a story in that he married, had 4 kids, lost his wife to leukemia in Tucson, got caught in a strike at the Tucson Star where they wanted to break the union, and the strike lasted 3.5 years. Now the International was sending them $100 a week, so he took that time to go to college. He went to the University of Arizona, and he graduated as a counselor.
So by the time the strike was finished,
he was ready to start a new career.
Isn't that great?
And didn't remarry until the youngest one was 16. And he just retired this past year as a counselor in charge of senior citizen programs in Cochise County.
Wow.
Arizona.
What are some of the very earliest memories that you can recall, Bernie, as a youngster? Or maybe even as a child?
Well, going to Coney Island from Upper Manhattan and making 3 transfers to save a nickel. My father knew how to transfer from one subway to the other, so we could travel for a nickel from Upper Manhattan to Coney Island.
Yeah.
But what a treat that was when he said, "We're going to Coney Island tomorrow."
Yes.
You know? And there we were with 3 or 4 shopping bags and everything else. You know, when I think today, you just jump in the car, you take your chairs with you, and you go.
Yeah, but there was something else that you just alluded to, and that's the fact that a youngster in those days could get on the subway and go from one part of the city to the other and not have to worry that they would be in trouble.
That's true.
Other adults would take care of them. And
yeah, we bordered on getting in trouble because we would leave, when I lived up in Washington Heights, my mother would let us go in the morning, and we'd come back at 5 o'clock. And in that time period, we would be in the subways traveling all over the city.
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean. I know.
And not paying.
Not
Jumping turnstiles or under turnstiles.
Yeah.
And how did your day go? Oh, fine. We were over at the playground 2 blocks from here.
You walked a thin line there, Bernie. I don't know.
Yeah.
Were there any other adults outside of mom and dad that played a significant role in your growing up? People who you maybe attach yourself to, or role models that you can think of, either in family or neighbors?
We had there was a fellow from the Holy Name Society. We became close. That I think we became compadres, meaning that he became the godfather to one of us. I forget which. And he was one of the first Puerto Ricans to graduate from CCNY, electrical engineer. And he worked on the Manhattan Project.
For the atomic bomb?
For the atomic bomb. All right. And so we sort of looked at him as, wow, what an achiever.
You bet.
And his kids were quite achievers too. Unfortunately, they both died young of heart attacks. But one was a physicist, and the other one was an administrator with Adelphi College. They were both on their way.
Wow.
In a big way. Yeah. In fact, Amiel from Adelphi College, he had tied in with Robert Kennedy at the end, so that he was really going. You know, Robert Kennedy had gone all the way, and he had stayed with him. God knows where he would have wound up.
You know, you mentioned Robert Kennedy. You came in to Brentwood, you said in 72? Is that when you started teaching here?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember Robert Kennedy's visit to the high school in 68.
Ah, right.
Right before, in the January, the year he was assassinated. Tragic loss for everybody.
I shook his hand in Main Street, Smithtown. I was a committee man at the time. I got involved in the Democratic Party. And I was a committee man, and we had a reception for him, and he spoke up in Smithtown.
And you shook Robert Kennedy's hand.
And I shook Robert Kennedy's hand.
Yeah, wonderful. I was going to ask you before, and it slipped away, and I'm back to ask you again. Grandparents. Do you have any memories of your grandparents?
I only met my grandmother. That year that we went back to Puerto Rico, I met my grandmother on my father's side. And she went on for 3 or 4 more years after we came back. She died at the age of 84. And my grandfather died at 82. So I never got to know him.
Never got to know them. What about, help me with the schools now. Just run through from your elementary school to where you went to high school, and then where you first started your undergraduate work and so on, Bernie. Where did you go to school?
Well, like I said, I went to public schools up till the 4th grade.
They didn't have junior highs in those days, did they? Or did they have?
No. Well, maybe they did, but I don't know, because when we came back, my father put me in a Catholic
so you went to parochial school then. Right.
And then from there, I continued in the Bronx to St. Anselm's. I graduated in the 8th grade. That's where, so there was no junior high for me.
Okay.
Then I went on to Cardinal Hayes.
All right.
I had a nun in the 8th grade who took an interest in me. Her name was Sister Mary Grace. So all my friends were going to Bronx Vocational. So she heard I wanted to go to Bronx Vocational. She called my father in, and she said, I don't want him going to Bronx Vocational. I want him to go to Catholic high school, even if you have to sacrifice. And at that time, the tuition was $5 a month.
Yeah, but big deal though. Yeah,
it's amazing, you know. Yeah. My father said, "Okay, I'll take him. Tell me when the registration is." And he took me, registered me, and he gave me the $5 every month. So, although I was always working after school. So after a while, I paid the tuition
Yes.
myself.
What were your favorite subjects in school, in high school?
Social studies
Okay.
and literature.
Ah.
Yeah.
Right. And when you worked after school, Bernie, what kind of work did you do? What jobs did you have?
Well, a lot of things. I would go downtown to deliver the New York Post and the American Journal, was it? To all the
Journal American, was
Journal
it?
American. I mean, those stacks.
Yeah. Yes.
I was only about 140 pounds. We used to deliver down to all the stations, all the subway stations.
Yes.
There's so many tunnels where you have to go and deliver papers. So we did that. And then I had other jobs. I remember working for Frank Meir, an importer of Irish linen, tablecloths and handkerchiefs and things like that. And he'd send me all over to New Jersey, to Brooklyn. I got to know every shortcut in Manhattan where I could stay warm while I went through Gimbel's, through Macy's.
Yes.
And I had a lot of homework to do back at home at night. And just when I'm ready to go home, he says, "Oh, I have something for you to take to Journal Square in New Jersey." Oh, God, which meant I didn't get home till 8:30. And there was a lot to be done.
Yeah.
In the meantime, during high school, a lot of people were coming from Puerto Rico, immigrating. And my father could never say no to any nephew or cousin. They would show up without any advance notice, and my father would take them in.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, my son had, my brother had come back from the Navy. We were only 5. Within 18 months, we were up to 15 people.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And one bathroom.
And one bathroom.
Yeah.
I used to do my homework at 12 o'clock at night in the bathroom.
Yeah. For a little privacy.
Yes.
Wow. What was the subject that you had the most trouble with in high school?
I'd say math. Right. And it's ironic that today I'm teaching the math and the GED, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm understanding it.
Yes.
Because of the materials that are available.
They say if you want to learn a subject, the best way to learn a subject is to teach it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a book company called Contemporary. They are fantastic. They have books that explain things so well.
Where did you do your teacher training?
Not Hunter. The same high school where Colin Powell went to.
You got me there.
It slips my mind.
Yeah.
It's up
Okay.
in the Bronx.
All right.
I did a semester there. I also did student teaching over at Comac High School because one of our neighbors was a school board member there. So she opened up doors for me. She called the chairman of the social studies department and she said, "I have a neighbor who would like to do some subbing." And so she got me in. And first I sat in with them, got to know the system. Then when I graduated for a year or two before I came here, I was doing subbing over there.
And when you came to Brentwood as a novice, as a new teacher, who were the people besides Nikki Nin and the individuals you've mentioned who were of help to you to get you through the ropes, to teach you the ropes? Did you have any? Do you remember any colleagues that you worked with in those early days that were helpful to you? And
well, the ESL program here was just getting started, really.
So you were really immersed in
practically on my own. Except for the materials I received from Nikki's office.
I wonder, Bernie, if that isn't the way it goes, though. I wonder if people, as much help as you can try to give a new teacher, they're pretty much on your own. You got to do it. You've got to do it yourself.
Yeah. Right.
You got to get your own feet.
Right. Well, once in a while, a colleague will give you some information that you could use. I remember I taught sociology here at night, and someone told me that you could get films from the library here in Brentwood, that they were quite good in delivering the day and the time. And so that helped a lot.
Yeah.
In that. So things like that, quite helpful.
Now, because you are no longer in the day program, you don't see, I assume you don't get a chance to see many of the people you used to work with as often as you used to.
Well, the first couple of years I came back at Christmas time when Barbara Britt would get the big heroes. And then I'd sort of tape it off.
Yes.
I guess if I go back, say, at this Christmas, I'm not going to know too many people.
A lot of new faces.
A lot of new faces, yeah.
And what about contacts with former students? Do you have any of those? Do people keep in touch with you?
Yeah. I had a boy from the Dominican Republic, Frank Rodriguez. terrific student. I had to feed him book after book. Today he's a captain in the Air Force.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. And he's stationed in Europe, and he doesn't want to come home.
Wow.
When he finishes one tour, they want to send him back. And you're entitled to go back to the States for 3 years. He says, no, give me another base in Europe. And the thing, he married a girl from our program, an Egyptian girl who was in the ESL program. And on a trip to New York, where we took the club, she came along, and they got tight. And eventually...
So they've built a life, but it's a lifestyle as well.
Oh, yeah, right.
And what do you correspond? Is that how you keep in touch?
Well, he used to come to my house and help me around.
Uh-huh.
And he loved my wife's cooking.
I hear what the draw was there, right?
So after he joined, I advised him join the Air Force, and he took the Marines. After 3 years, he realized that he should have gone to the Air Force because they have better schools. I told him, Marines are going to teach you how to clean a rifle and how to shoot. They don't have too many schools. You're lucky if you get into a school. So after 3 years, he joined the Air Force. They gave him corporal stripes for the 3 years he had with the Marines, but they sent him to school. Mm-hmm. And when he was transferred to Florida, they told him, you're going to be here for 3 years. Went to college in Florida. And he graduates in 3 years from college. They sent him to officers training. And today he's an officer in the aircraft maintenance, the engine portion. And he's up to captain.
Bernie, that story just reminds me of the fact that in so many ways we change people's lives doing what we do.
Right.
Definitely. There are teachers who say, yeah, but you don't get to see it. Mm-hmm. Do you find that you have sufficient evidence of the impact that you've had on people's lives to warrant saying that you have affected lives?
Oh, yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
I hand carried a lot of people to schools. I took one girl, Rosa Madrid, over to Farmingdale. I got her into the nursing program. And here's a girl, they didn't want to take her because she didn't quite measure up on the English portion, but I told them she'll make it because she's determined that she'll work. And sure enough, she graduated this past year.
What a good feeling. What do you think about the standards that now there's a lot of talk about raising standards and for all students and during the day school, the pressure to pass the regents and increasing demands for regents. Do you think that's a good thing or not?
Well, yes and no. The parents have to be aware that the standards are going up, and they're going to have to cooperate in making sure that they do more homework, they do more study, or they're going to face failure. A lot of kids are not going to make it under the new standards. Yeah. And I don't know if they're going to come up with an alternative diploma. So, some kids it might help.
Now, you had clearly very supportive parents right from the beginning. Both your mother and father were right there with you. But not all youngsters are so fortunate to have parents who are that, or maybe even today it's different because both parents are working and not able to be abreast of what's going on.
Right.
But I wonder whether or not you see any hope for example, a school district like Brentwood, with these changes being imposed and pressures being put on.
I understand they're going to do away with the RCTs because so these same teachers that are tutoring kids in the RCTs should tutor them into these other areas where they're going to have to perform better in math and English, things like that.
Now, do you think, this is a silly question, but it's at the same time not, the day you left full-time teaching, or the days you left, you worked harder or as hard as the first days in the classroom, because the pay difference was very extreme.
Right.
Perhaps I should rephrase that. You worked just as hard at the end as you did at the beginning.
Definitely, sure.
But teachers, certainly in Brentwood, as in other parts of the state, have begun to be paid more and more what they're worth. Did you ever get any response from, or not response? Do you get any? You think parents understood that, particularly in a community like Brentwood, where perhaps the salaries that teachers are making are greater than the salaries of some of the taxpayers who live here?
Oh, sure, definitely. The feedback I get, sure, they complain about the taxes they're paying. You know, some people in Latin American countries don't pay any taxes.
Okay.
And when they buy a house and they're faced with these tremendous taxes, it's quite a burden, which leads to illegal apartments in order to help themselves out.
You never had any discipline problems, did you? Even that's the question that people say, oh, I wouldn't be a teacher because you're always dealing with discipline problems.
No, they were far and in between.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had guys like Mr. Ruggiero and other people who backed us up and helped.
Who influenced you to become a teacher in the first place? Why did you decide to do that? Was it the nuns that you mentioned before that...
Oh, yeah. I remember Sister Grace saying, you know, someday you're going to be a social studies teacher because, boy, it's so natural to you. and especially when we read about the Spanish explorations and discoveries and things like that, I used to eat that up. I was very proud that they did all that. Yeah. Although, you know, today they're downgrading Columbus and some of the other people, but and it's helped me in traveling out west and all these other places where the Spanish had an influence. So I was ready. In fact, I was hoping that I could get a social studies regents class. I never got that far.
Is that right?
Yeah. I never got into it because I was only in the social studies department for 2 classes, and then I had 3 ESLs. Things changed from year to year. What Pat McCarthy was saying is, oh, maybe next year. But then my schedule changed. They needed people in the Spanish department. So because you had 3 certifications, you were always being saddled with different
one
things.
of the questions I like to ask, you've just answered, and that is, what is there that you would like to have accomplished that you didn't have a chance to accomplish? And maybe this is one of those things, to have taught that kind of class, but is there any other way that you would answer that question? In the years that you were in day school, was there anything else that you would like to have seen happen that you couldn't make happen?
No, I was quite happy to be a teacher because I started late. Perhaps if I had started earlier, I could have done more with myself. Yeah, I'm happy for some of the others who have come in, like, you know, Mr. Suarez now, who's assistant principal at North Junior High or North Middle School. Mrs. Gomez Alexander, who's now principal at North. You remember Mr. Alexander in our department?
Yes, I do.
His wife is now the principal at North. So these are the people who went to college and started in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I went to college and then I had a big gap between. I had to buy a house, raise 3 kids, and then go to college and start a new career at the age of 42.
But it seems to me, Bernie, you maximized your time. You really maximized your time in education.
I think
with the decisions that you made.
Right.
What if you could put a title over those years in terms of a mission that you had every day when you came into the classroom? What would it read? What was your mission as you saw it? Well, besides bringing home a paycheck and supporting a family and all of those things that we all do.
Well, you know, opening doors for kids, teaching them English so that they could open their own doors, you might say.
Yes.
And to see some of them leave the program, because we always believed in a transition. All right, if they come in and know nothing, they're with us for a couple of years without question. You had to keep them to learn, but then gradually get them into the regular program and see them graduate.
Right.
And it was possible.
If you had a message that you would like to leave with teachers who are just beginning, who have come right from school, as you just described, person who's right at the starting line, what kind of a message would you like to leave for those people? What kind of advice would you give them, based on your experience?
Well, you have to develop a rapport with the students, which is important, because if you don't, then life is going to be miserable for you. And you have to watch your master teachers and see how they're doing it, and try to use them as a model. But basically, each teacher has to find his own way, I find.
So trust yourself and your own judgment, ultimately.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, what haven't we talked about, Bernie? There are a lot of things that have happened to you in the years that you have been in the district and in the classroom. Some high points, some low points, some special moments that I don't know anything about. And maybe if there's something that you can think of that hasn't been discussed, that you can share with us.
I was very surprised that we had such an association. I didn't know about that. I didn't know teachers had an association, because we had a good union in Sperry's. So I was union-minded since then. And I'm happy to say I have a pension from Sperry's.
Oh.
And all my children were born under the medical plan that I had in Sperry's. But then when I came here and I found, gee, they have an association. Everything's laid out for you. That you have a contract to follow, that you don't have to go to the principal and bargain for yourself. So that was helpful. And I think that they've done right by us. I'm comfortable.
This is one of the advantages that I think we have passed along. The younger teachers that are just beginning are standing very much on the shoulders of people like you.
Oh, definitely.
Who have paved the way for them.
Right. And if
Many
they don't,
times. Go ahead, say.
And I think they should realize, someone should let them know what went ahead and why they find themselves in a good position with a good salary and good benefits.
Which is not to say that it's not going to be tough going for them, because they'll have their own.
Oh yeah, they'll have to negotiate eventually for themselves. But the groundwork is there, and they do get involved and fight to keep what they have. Because
I think that your comments are going to help to accomplish that purpose, because I'm hopeful that someday they'll be able to listen to what you just said, and that will be a contribution that you will make to that objective. Bernie, thank you so much. I'm very glad that we were able to talk. I hope that we have done justice to all of the experiences that you've had here. You certainly have had. You certainly have occupied a unique place in the last generation of teachers in Brentwood, and it's been my pleasure to be able to talk with you today.
Thanks for renewing my life.
Thanks, Bernie.
Okay.